Hey everyone, welcome to Rancher Overview Training. Today we will be walking through specifically Rancher version 1.6.12. My name is Kenara Shah. I'm a software engineer here at Rancher Labs, and I'll be joined by James. He's a tools and automation engineer here, and he'll be answering all your questions that you have today. So we'll be first going through a technical introduction to Rancher and its basic features. We'll definitely keep the slides to a minimum. So there are only a couple of slides after these, and then I'll be just demoing stuff. As always, questions are always welcome. So the demo is about an hour or so, but we won't leave until all of your questions are answered. In your Go webinar control panel, you'll be able to find the questions option, so you can ask all your questions there. So before starting the training, I would like to go through the primary resources that will be helpful in addition to this training. First and foremost, our official docs. They are pretty exhaustive and they have documentation about all the settings and configurations that you might want to look up. A more interactive form would be our Rancher forums. There are a lot of Rancher community users here, as well as our engineers who interact and solve questions. Also, you will find all announcements as well as general information here. A more intermediate form would be the Slack. Again, for Slack, all of our engineers are there. There are a lot of active users. In addition to that, we also have channels dedicated to specific topics. So if you have, some specific question to a specific topic, it would be very useful to check out Slack. So the key topics that we are going to cover today would be setting up a Rancher server, setting up access control so that nobody else can access your Rancher server, creating environments, adding private registries, adding resources and hosts, creating stacks and services, as well as load balancers. It's okay if you don't understand all of these terms right now. We'll walk through each of them as and when they come. And there are multiple ways to interact with Rancher server, like UI, API, Rancher Compose CLI. So we'll see how to use each of them. I'll also show you how to use Rancher catalog, and we'll do a bit of introduction to how to set up Kubernetes in Rancher. I won't go into much depth about using Kubernetes because we have another whole training dedicated to that, but I'll still show how to just set it up. So let's get started and check out our Rancher server. So before that, there are multiple options and multiple ways you can set up your Rancher server. So as you can see in the docs, these are all the options that we have. But basically, if you have any host that has a supported version of Docker, it should be good enough. You can add the host. If it is an unsupported version of Docker, it's going to show up in the UI as unsupported. You can still work through that, but it's not really tested. Today we will be using a single container non-HA setup, which is super easy. All you have to do is just use this command and it will set up the server. We'll be using local MySQL, but it's not really recommended. The recommended way is to go by the external database since it can handle external load and different configurations. So here is my Rancher server already set up. As you can see here, we are on version 1.6.12, and you can see I've already added 2 hosts with labels demo is equal to true. I'll show how to add host in a while, but first of all, you can see here an exclamation point in admin tab. This is going to stay till you set up your access control. So first of all, let's go and set up our access control. There are multiple options available here, each of them documented in the docs. You can select whichever one you prefer, but today I am just going to use local auth. So let's go ahead and set up an account for me. As shown here, the first account that you create will become the admin and will have the full control over Rancher. Once you enable your local auth, it's going to automatically authenticate you and sign you in. So you can see here that I've been signed in and I'm the admin. You can also add more accounts and manage accounts, or there's also accounts under admin tab. So let's go ahead and also add an account for James. And you can see there are two account types, user and admin. I'm going to keep this as user so I can show you later on how to use this. Cool. So the other options that we have under admin are audit log. Audit log is basically once you have created users, you can see how each and every user interacts with the API, different information about the environment, resource type, and identity. Then we have processes. Processes, right now we haven't done anything, but when we start doing things, you'll be able to see which processes are running, which have been delayed, and which have been completed. We are not using an HA setup, but like if you are using one, you'll be able to see different UUIDs and advertised addresses. Machine drivers is about adding different kind of hosts, so you can see all the available options if you are an admin. And I'll go to add host now and show you how to add host. So you can add it from here as well, or you can go to host where we have two hosts available with demo is equal to true. So if you go to add host, you'll be able to see all the options here when the ones that we saw just before. So if you have just about any Ubuntu machine with supported version on Docker on it, Rancher already has a command ready. All you have to do is just copy and paste it, and it will show up in the host screen. Today I'm going to show you how to add a DigitalOcean host. So all you need is your API key, and let me get that API key for you. It's pretty simple. So now you can give it a name, your particular region that you are in. The rest of the things are there, and here is an option to set up the demo label that we just saw on the two hosts that was added. So demo is equal to true, and you will be able to see all the steps that happen while creating the host. So basically, it sets up a Rancher agent which will allow communication between, and it authenticates itself, passes its credentials to the server. So now your host can basically communicate to the server. It takes up a while to set up, so I'm just going to pause this for a while. I'm just going to delete this because we already have two hosts ready and up. Once we have two hosts up, let me talk about the different environments. So environments is our way of isolating resources. Resources could be Rancher, host, different kind of services, infrastructure services, and which will be owned by different one or more groups or users. So you can see here that we have currently two environments already present. Each of these environment is defined by a specific template. So a template will, as you can see, we have predefined a few templates, but if you go to adding, you can add your own template, and it's going to define which orchestration engines you want, which applications you want, the external DNS services that you want, as well as management services, networking services. You can select either of these and create a template, which will then help you to create an environment with that particular template. So for example, let me go ahead and create a template. I'll create it for Rancher NFS. I'll be calling it NFS template. We'll select the orchestration engine as cattle, and here is the storage option for Rancher NFS. So enabling it is pretty easy. It asks you for the necessary configuration options. Let me bring up my server name, IP address, and you will need an exported base directory, which is currently, I've set it up as NFS. And if you go and configure it and create, a template will be created here, as you can see, NFS template. Now adding an environment would be just giving it a name, NFS environment, and you will see that the template that you created will show up here. So select NFS template. As you can see, because we have access control enabled, you'll be able to add different users to your particular environment. So it's useful to group users according to the permissions that you want to give. So let's add James here, and you'll be able to see what kind of role do you want to assign. So there are different kind of roles and different permissions which come with it will be described in the docs, but as the name suggests, it's pretty intuitive that if it's read only, the user will be only allowed to read things, but won't be allowed to create, update, or delete hosts or services. So let's keep that read only for now and create the environment. So then if you go ahead and see in the environment tab, you'll be able to see NFS environment here. Because we haven't added any host yet, it's going to show up this warning. But let's go ahead and see the infrastructure stack, and you will see NFS coming up here. I'm not going to work with this environment, but I just wanted to show you how to create one. So let's go back to the default environment. Here we have our host ready, as we saw before, and we talked about environments. Let's move ahead to stacks. So there are two kinds of stacks, user stacks and infrastructure stacks. The infrastructure stacks are the ones which have been created and set up by Rancher to do all the plumbing work. So as the name health check suggests, health check is going to ensure that just check that the communication between the host and the server is running properly. So let's say if one of your hosts wasn't running properly and there was some issue in communication, it will show up in one of these containers. The health state will be changed. If IPsec handles all the networking part of it, network services has metadata, DNS, and network manager. Scheduler will be scheduling services on different hosts depending on the labels that you give. I'll show that in a minute when we actually create a stack. So this was about infrastructure services. If we go on to user services, we haven't added anything yet. So for example, let's go ahead and add a stack. So I'll name it blog, and we'll be adding a service to it. So right now I'm just going to create a working stack, and I'll show how that works, and then I'll backtrace and show what each of these things mean. So right now I'm just going to give it a name ghost, and I'll give it an image. And so this option, always pull image before creating. So a lot of times when you are testing something with your image, you are going to make changes, and then you're going to recreate the service with that image. In that case, you would always want to keep this tab checked so that it's going to reflect those changes. Port map, the Ghost My blog is running on a public port 2368 and private 2368. Now, right now, both the values are same, but like they mean different things. So public host port is the port that is accessed by public through the internet, and the public port maps to the private container port 2368. You can see we have multiple options here available. So command is the command that you want to run on start of the container. Volumes, we currently don't have any volume there, but I'll later on show how to use this after creating Rancher NFS. There are different networking modes available. Again, they'll be described in the docs what each one of these does. There are different security and host parameters. You can add secrets. You can enable health check. So if you go to HTTP, you can give it a particular endpoint where your health check for that particular container is enabled, and it will consider this when it will be trying to get the health state of the container. You can add labels, so you can add different labels for the service, and there is scheduling. So the labels that we put on the host, demo is equal to true, we can specifically force the service to start on one of those hosts. There are multiple labels that you can use, service, container, or container with the name. Today we'll use host label, and I'll give it a key, demo is equal to true. And you can see that the service is scaled at one container, so it is going to start on one of the hosts that have demo is equal to true. So let's go ahead and create this. So as you can see, I've enabled the health check with HTTP, but I haven't given it a port or a name, which is required. So it's going to show up this warning. I'll make this none and create it now. So while this takes up time to create, let's add one more stack, which is Nginx. So as you can see in the UI, there's a stack. A stack is a grouping of services. So all the services will show up here. So let's go add one other service. I'm going to call it Nginx again. And we'll now scale it to 10 containers, let's say. So now you can see that a service is going to be grouping of these 10 containers. And I'm going to use the image of one of my coworkers. What it is going to do is it is going to show up the container ID of the container which is running. Because now we have 10 containers, it is going to show up the ID of the container which it is running right now. So let me put this up. Again, I'll want to schedule this on the label demo is equal to true and set that up. So as you can see, the blog is up and running, and if you just click on this port, you'll be able to see how it functions. Okay, this is still activating. So if you want to just figure out if what's the state is while it is running or something, you can just come to this page and see the state, the IP addresses, and on which particular host it has been scheduled on. So, and another way is to check it, go to your host page and see it up here. So as you can see, we had 10 containers and we had 2 hosts. So the scheduler has scheduled half of them here and half of them here. The reason why I created 10 containers, and the reason why you will see what is stack, with the actual use of stack, I can group different services. So let's add a load balancer. So if it is Nginx, I'm going to name it Nginx LB, and let's say we want to balance the load between all of these containers. So let me give 480, and you can select services across stack or you can select the same stack. So right now I'm going to select Nginx and create this LB. Before that, we can see here that we have 2 port rules. This is a service rule, but we also have a selector rule. So let's say you have given a particular service some label, and now you want to load balance between those services which have a specific label set. So you can do that using a selector rule and give it a selector here. Right now we don't have any selectors on service, so I'm just going to create a load balancer with amongst the 10 containers that we had. While this comes up, let me talk about the infrastructure, the things that we have under infrastructure. So we already saw host. You can get all the information about containers here, the IP addresses, host, the images, and the commands if they have been given on startup for the container. Storage options, right now we do not have any storage driver, but I'll later on create and show you how it goes. You can add secrets, you can add certificates. Certificates are important. So let's say if you are doing load balancing and you want SSL termination, you will want to add SSL certs here. If you want it to be secure, HTTPS, again, you will want to add a cert here. Registries, you can pull your own private images to Rancher by going to add registry, and let's say you have your images in Docker Hub, Quay, or some custom website. All you have to do is enter your credentials and it will pull up the private images for you. So let's go back to our stack and see if the load balancer is up. Yes. So if we go there, you'll see that this is the front page of the load balancer, and I'm going to give it the endpoint where you'll be able to see the container IDs. So this is the first container which is load balance. So load balancer normally round robins through all the containers. So if I hit it again, you'll be able to see another ID. Cool. So this was about stacks. I'll also want to talk a bit about how to talk to a Rancher server. So up till now, we have been always using UI, but let's say we want to use CLI. So the way to do it is to just download the binary from this download CLI option here. You can select one based on your OS. I already have a binary downloaded, but what it's going to do is it's just going to give you a zip file. You have to unzip and the binary will be present. So I'll pull that screen up in a second. when you start using Rancher CLI, it helps to have the help option handy. So here you can see all the commands that you can use to do various operations on stacks, services, and volumes. So you can also find exhaustive information here in Rancher CLI. Rancher CLI, you can see how to set it up, as well as some sample commands, as well as you can see the entire list in commands and options. So let's say we want to just set this up. How do we authenticate the Rancher CLI to talk to a Rancher server? So you'll have to pass different config parameters, and it will ask you in here if you do Rancher config. So first of all, we'll have to give this the UI. So here is the UI URL. The next is access key. Access key can be obtained under API keys here. So if you go to add account API key, and I'm going to name this demo key, it's going to give you the access and secret key. As it shows up in the UI, you will definitely want to set this up before closing this. So let's go set this access key. Let's see. Okay. It says that connection has been refused. Let me go ahead and try that again. Okay, so as you can see, it is going to give you the environments that are available, and I'm going to select right now the default environment, and it will save your configs here. So once we are done, we can close this, and let's say we want to see which particular services we have in here. So you can just do PS, and you'll able to see all the services that we created along with that state and endpoints information here. I want to talk a bit about the catalog now. So we have two kinds of catalogs here: library and community. Library catalogs are the catalogs that are Rancher certified, and the ones that we want you to use. They are basic, and they're the infrastructure services that you can enable here. So you can see we have a lot of options. We also have community catalogs. Community catalogs are the ones that the community users, they have contributed in here and they want you to use them. We have a very active community, so you'll find a lot of them here, and we'll keep on adding more. They're pretty easy. Basically, all you have to do is, you can just go to any of them, and it's going to ask you the necessary parameters that are required, and it's just then one click sort of thing. You go to launch, and it is going to launch that catalog service. But you can also add your own catalog. So let's say you want to add your own catalog. It can be at two levels. It will be either confined by the environment, or it can be global. So if you want to add an environment level catalog, you can go to manage here, add catalog, give it a name, give it a get fetchable URL, and here you can give it the environment name where you want it. But if you want a global level catalog, you will have to go to admin settings, and you can do that only if you are an admin, and you can go to add catalog and add it up here. So that's how you'll be able to add catalogs. I will also want you to show, so here is the repo where we have all the community catalogs present. You can just go through them and see how to set it up if you want to contribute, or if you just want to see how it is done. You can just see all the config YAMLs, as well as there are different versions present, so you can go to either of them and see the Docker Compose YAML files, Rancher Compose YAML files, and etc. So I'm going to go ahead and add a catalog just to show how it is done. I'm going to add Rancher NFS. So here we have Rancher NFS, and we've already done this before, if you remember, like when we were creating an environment. But let's say you created an environment and you forgot adding this up. The catalog is pretty handy. You can just add this up here and it will still show up in the infrastructure tab. So I'm going to fetch the IP address of the server again, the base directory, and launch it up. So if you now go to infrastructure tab, you can see that this is coming up. Now let's add a stack, use a stack to use this NFS. So you can go to persistent storage here under infrastructure services, and you will be able to see how to use it with Rancher Compose as well as UI to create persistent storage. So if I want to create a stack, we have already done this before, so I'm going to create NFS demo stack. And you can give your Docker Compose here, as well as you can use the Rancher CLI to pass this Docker Compose and create a stack. I'm just going to take this YAML file from here, and I'm going to add tty is equal to true so that I can exec into the container later on. Let me use this and we'll create up a stack. So while it is coming up, let me talk about what this exactly does. We have created a volume. We had a driver Rancher NFS. We have created a volume bar, and now we are mounting this volume point to the container point at where lib storage. Let's say we want to do the exact same thing using UI. So we go to add service. Now I'm going to create foo2. You can see that the image that we used here was BusyBox. So I'm going to put BusyBox here. And in UI, we have the option volumes. So all you have to do is give it a name, Rancher NFS, the one that we used, and the volume here. So the volume that we used here, I'm just going to get this from here and create the service. So you will now, and we added tty equal to true. This is enabled here like by default. So I'm just going to go ahead and create this service. The reason like why I created two services is let's say now we have volumes which will be shared between these two containers, because in both of them I have given where lib storage. So if you just want to make sure this is working as expected, we'll go into one of these containers, create a file there, and then we'll go into the other container and see if it's there. So if you want to exec into a shell, you can go from stack. Here we have service, and then you go into the container and exec it. So let's go to where lib storage. And I'm just creating a sample file test.txt. It is there in foo.1, and if our NFS and everything is working as expected, we should be able to find it here as well. So if we go here and go to cd where lib storage and ls, we'll find it up here. So that's about NFS. Let's see if I'm missing out on something. So we've covered the admin tab, just a summary, and we have covered infrastructure. We have covered different kind of catalogs, stacks, and default. So now if I go to manage environments, I would want to show up like how to set up Kubernetes. So as we talked before, you can just add an environment with Kubernetes demo, and we already have orchestration engine Kubernetes present here. You can add different users as we have done before, just walking through it again. So it just all comes up together. We give it read-only permission and we create. And then you can see the environment coming up here. Okay, it's demo, so we go there. So here we haven't added any hosts, and it makes sense that it's going to wait for at least one host to be added so that the containers have something to run on. But like I've already created demo Kubernetes for this demo purposes where I have added a host, and if you see the infrastructure stacks, you can see that all the services for running Kubernetes are there, which is very powerful, because it's all you have to do is click and add an environment, and Rancher has everything configured for you. So your Kubernetes is up and running. You don't really have to do anything else. And you can see all the services that are there, like it has a kubelet, ingress controller, and everything that you need for Kubernetes to run. I'm going to go to CLI and just show. So in the CLI, we also have kubectl configured, so you don't really have to do anything. If you want to, you can go to your host SSH and set up the config so that you can use your kubectl from there by generating a config here. But if you want, you can just use it up here, and you can do get all to see what is there. So kubectl is up and running. We also have Helm set up, so if you see Helm, it's up there. I'm not going to go much detail in here. So we have our Kubernetes training specifically for this purpose. You can check that out. And you can also go to our try.rancher.com, where you can play with Rancher. Can't really think of anything else to. I think I'm done. Like, James, do we have any questions that you might want to answer?
There's one question regarding the syntax of Docker images, and in lieu of typing it all out, maybe we can just discuss it, since there are a lot of options. So the question was, what is the syntax for Docker Nginx and Let's Encrypt containers in the Rancher UI? Now, really, the question. The Rancher UI is just starting a container with a Docker image. So really the question is, what is the syntax for a Docker image? And there are many ways of defining a Docker image. There's a lot of implicit information. So if you look at the question, the syntax of the image name is the registry name, / namespace / image name : version, where if the registry name is not provided, it is implicitly Docker Hub. If a namespace is not provided, it is implicitly the library, which is the officially supported set of images in Docker Hub. The image name is always required. In this scenario, it would be Nginx or whatever Let's Encrypt is. I haven't looked. And the version, if not specified, is implicitly latest. Typically, latest can be considered, or latest or stable can be considered symlinks for a specific version of an image. But fundamentally, the only required piece of information is the image name. Now, if you wanted to use a private registry, you would, of course, need to specify the endpoint to your registry, as well as if you are attempting to run images that are not the official Docker Hub supported images, then you would also need to provide a namespace, which would be your Docker Hub account in the case of using the public registry. There are several more questions. Let's see, just curious to know how Rancher is different from OpenShift. Not touching that one. Ananda, thanks. You're quite welcome. Can we add standalone hosts instead of AWS or DigitalOcean? What are the minimums? Yes. If you go to infrastructure hosts screen, there is an option to add a custom host. You can use any host that can run Docker. The only requirement is that you have Docker installed and you're capable of interacting with the host. So yeah, the registration process is a little more complex in the custom scenario. You actually run a container which registers with Rancher. But it is possible for bare metal deployments, or if you're using some cloud provider that we have not abstracted. Next question. I'm having trouble with using the Docker Rancher, both Kubernetes environment and default kernel environment. and Linux in both VirtualBox and Hyper-V virtualizations with TLS errors and versioning errors, such as this error on Rancher OS VMs is info remediation process. Yes, so if you are running Rancher using TLS and your certificates are not necessarily, if they're not official certificates signed by some recognized certificate authority, there's extra work involved in adding trust for whatever whatever generated CA you used. I will find a link and point it to you for solving it specifically, but I think we're delving into a little too technical conversation. Let's see, I purchased commercial SSL certificate. Oh, so this looks like it is a standard certificate. Well done. Why don't we take this one offline? I would be happy to help you with that. Please show how to set up SSL certs on Rancher OS. Again, I'm not sure if we have time for that one, but we can take it offline. Any migration option is there in Ranchers. So I'm not sure if they mean generically if you're using another container or orchestration solution. Migrating to Rancher 1.6 is fairly straightforward. There are a lot of analogs between some of the other other orchestration tools out there like Kubernetes and Swarm. Again, Rancher 1.6 is just another flavor. Any binding option is there with AWS? So I'm going to interpret that as do we support do we have some abstraction layer where we can handle AWS infrastructure? And yes, we have a machine driver for AWS that allows you to add hosts and interact with AWS in a transparent manner. They're an official CA. Great. Offline is great. Great. I'll talk to you, Don. Thank you, Ananda. Thanks. Last one, what versions of Rancher and Docker work well in production, both in VirtualBox and Docker for Windows? So I cannot speak for Docker for Windows. However, the officially supported set of Docker versions is documented on our doc site.
I opened that up here.
Great. Yes. So that should point you to the Docker version that we officially support. And I would recommend using the latest version of Rancher 1.6. However, earlier versions have similar. In fact, I think 1.6.12 was primarily a quality release. So they all should work in a virtualized environment. And if you're having any issues in setting it up, perhaps a good reference would be on GitHub. If you go to GitHub, Rancher/Vagrant, we've set up an automated, it's Vagrant-based scripts to deploy a cluster on your local machine. So if you're having any specific problems, maybe you can look at this as a reference, but it allows you, again, to run any version of Rancher. So really the officially supported Docker versions is the only restriction. Next, in particular, Docker for Windows with Rancher OS. Okay, so Windows containers can only run on a Windows host, as far as I know. So the answer would be no. There's no support for Docker for Windows in Rancher OS. Srinivasa, can we have an HA-enabled Rancher? I.e., do we have to use HA proxy, or can we use Rancher OS? Yes, Rancher supports a high availability deployment. As we see on the screen, when you deploy multiple nodes, the user interface will show you what nodes have registered, and the deployment instructions are defined on our documentation site. And yes, you'll need something to load balance the traffic between your nodes. That's just an unfortunate reality of high availability deployment. You can, if you're in some cloud environment such as AWS, you can leverage their load balancer abstractions, or you can use HA proxy if you're on like a bare metal environment. You have a lot of options there. But fundamentally, you need TCP load balancing, not HTTP, because Rancher makes heavy use of WebSockets. So that's the one key piece there is TCP load balancing. We have an option in AWS EKS now. How Rancher overcome that? I don't know what EKS is. I'm assuming it is, sounds like Elastic Container. I'm not familiar with it, so I can't speak to that one. What virtual network overlays are available through Rancher? WeaveNet. We support IPsec, is what you get out of the box, and VXLAN. And IPsec is based on StrongSwan. And we actually also have a per host subnet implementation, which is no overlay network. It's just manually configuring routes between a set of hosts. Those are your three primary options. Yes, so EKS is Amazon's managed Kubernetes service, and again, all of the major cloud providers are starting to come out with these services, and Rancher has been in the business of doing this for a lot longer, so it's going to take time for some of these services to reach feature parity with Rancher. But if you just need a Kubernetes cluster to hack on, then pick your favorite cloud provider. Is there a way to detect already installed Docker containers with Rancher and import them? Yes, any Docker containers that are running on any host will be detected by Rancher when you register that host. They will not be part of a service or a stack in Rancher. However, you can manage them. You can do the logs, you can get a shell, you can interact with the container as you would within the normal Docker lifecycle. Can I add Docker containers within the Rancher agent host? And will the Rancher server sync the added containers? Yes. That's more or less the same question. Yes. Yep. He said so. All right. I think that is all, besides our certificate question, which we'll answer offline. Oh, there's one more, the difference between AWS and Rancher. So they're fundamentally different tools. So Rancher is an orchestration platform for automating and managing your infrastructure. Whereas AWS is more of like an infrastructure provider. They will sell you virtual machines for certain periods of time. However, they themselves are not going to orchestrate or manage your software. However, they do have some abstractions. Like if you're familiar with some of the services on AWS, it's the same basic thing, except that the orchestration tools that Rancher provides are very generic and can be used to run and automate any workload, any infrastructure. So, and again, we're not tied to any specific cloud provider, so you have a lot of flexibility in using Rancher, as opposed to some of the abstractions in the more common cloud providers. Add these containers to service. I'm not entirely sure if you create containers on a host directly, if you can add them or associate them with a service. I'm inclined to say no, but I'll leave that one as an exercise for the reader. Will we use all AWS services in Rancher? So I interpret that as, is there going to be some integration with all of the services that AWS provides? And no. So Rancher, Kubernetes, all these orchestration tools are more general purpose, and they can do anything that AWS services can do and more. There's just a little bit of work in actually defining it yourself. So no, it will never expose those services. However, it provides you the primitives to build those services yourself. MightOrg does not allow socket bind mount. Rancher agent does not work. Is there any other way to run Rancher agent on those? Unfortunately, no. That's the way we've designed it. So yeah, I think you're out of luck in that case. One more. Default password for root Rancher OS. On the latest versions, there is no password. It is all key-based authentication. Okay. And looks like that. Oh, we got one more. How to recover the failed Docker instances. So that's a pretty generic question. So if I'm interpreting instances as containers, then Rancher autonomously handles failures of containers. That's the whole purpose. Is there's a health check mechanism that when you define it for some service, it will periodically check the health of your containers in however way you've defined it. If it finds that one is unhealthy, or some user came and deleted the container or corrupted some data, Rancher will automatically clean it up and redeploy it. That's one of the fundamental values of the system, is that it automates the management and failure. It recovers when it can. There are some unrecoverable scenarios, such as a hardware failure, and if you have a high availability deployment, then Rancher will be capable of healing your resiliency. However, there are some scenarios where there's just no way to automatically heal. What is Rancher charges to utilize these services? So Rancher is free and open source. You can run it for free. You're going to have to pay for the hardware that runs it. So if that's your own machine, then whatever you pay for it, or whatever cloud provider you're using, it's the same billing. However, if you want support from us, then please contact our sales department. Okay, looks like there are no more questions coming in. Don, if you want to, oh, one more. No, are there any plans for other options coming out in future release as opposed to socket bind mount? Well, Rancher 2.0 is coming soon. I don't want to talk about it too much. However, it will be fundamentally different, and you might find that it does not require such features. However, you will. I still believe that one of the components of that new deployment requires running a privileged container. So you're always going to have that problem. And if host bind mounting is an issue, then yeah, maybe you need to hand roll something. Is there a best practice workflow for desktop to cloud? With Rancher cluster, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that one. You have a couple options. You can either interact with the user interface And you can do most everything through there, or you can use our command line interface, Rancher CLI. I personally use the UI, but it's really up to you. And again, it doesn't really matter if it's on your local machine or on a cloud, since it's, yeah, again, you're just interacting with some service. Want to learn this Rancher from scratch? Tell me, where can I start? Docs.rancher.com is your friend. Go to the installation section. Are there auto-scaling capabilities for nodes and or services if the CPU limit is exceeded? So natively, no, there is no host auto-scaling. However, a lot of people have, some of our customers and some of the community have implemented this themselves. A while back, I think pre 1.0 or maybe shortly thereafter, I played with something that does just that. However, that required using cAdvisor, which we're no longer running by default. So I guess the answer is there's nothing out of the box that can do it, but there's nothing stopping you from doing so. Sorry I got here late, as you may have covered this, but with Rancher 2.0, are you going all in with Kubernetes and scrapping the other engines? Yeah. Where it is available. So Rancher, we typically build and push our releases to Docker Hub. Have a look under the Rancher account, so hub.docker.com/Rancher, and you'll want the server. Could you be more precise than Rancher 2.0 is coming soon? I don't know when it's going to be, when GA is coming. It'll be sometime early 2018, Q1 or Q2. I'm not entirely sure. Love the UI. Thanks a lot. Yeah, a lot of our customers really love the UI, and I think that's what makes us stand out from some of the competition. What about security groups in Rancher? So security groups is like kind of AWS terminology for configuring, well, I would recommend you look at the documentation. It'll show you how to lock down your Rancher installation if you're running it in AWS. I think that's what you mean by that. Really, all you need is access to the port over which Rancher UI is running. That's your single point of ingress. Rancher CLI interacts with that endpoint, and the UI is also running there. So that looks like it. We're running low on time. So I guess, Don, if you want to send me your email, we can talk about certificates. But otherwise, I think that's all of you.
Thank you so much, guys, for asking all of these questions. Just a reminder to once again check out the Rancher Kubernetes training, which will be happening next week. And feel free to play out with Rancher on try.rancher.com. Thank you so much.